I am the discoverer of hitherto unknown natural phenomena, which greatly aid in the understanding of people, from which I constructed a revolutionary practical philosophic system called Septemics and published it in the book Septemics, Hierarchies of Human Phenomena. Today, we're going to discuss some of the content of that book. This is the scale of physical fitness. This is a linear scale, so there's no apparent congruence between levels 1 and 7 as you have on a spiral scale. It's a gradual scale, meaning you move gradiently from level to level, as opposed to a quantum scale where you jump from level to level. Once you find somebody's level on this, you're done. Now, you can try to move them up to the next level, which is the whole idea, or you can use it on another person. But this is not context-driven, as are the specific scales. What are we measuring with this scale? We look at the dotted vertical line on the right. At the top is infinite survival potential, total immunity. At the bottom, it says zero survival potential, no immunity. Note that infinite survival potential, total immunity is above superhuman. This would be a state that's really unattainable for a human. A human is not going to have total immunity. He might have 99.9%, and he's not going to have infinite survival potential, even if he lives 1,000 years. Or Methuselah lived, they say, 900 years. That's still not infinite survival potential. At the other extreme, if you're dying, there's still some survival potential. Once you go to zero survival potential, you're dead and you have no immunity. That's what this scale measures. This is important. This is what medical doctors do not seem to grasp, and even many people in the holistic community don't really grasp. What are we dealing with here? What are we working with in this scenario, in this context? Everybody is at some level on this scale. At any point in time, you are somewhere on this scale. When you die, you go below 7. Not many people get to the top of this scale, which is true for many scales, not just this one. Not many people really get to level 2, and very few get to level 1. So let's start at the bottom, succumbing. Succumbing is another way of saying dying. Dying refers to a living organism. Succumbing is a more general term, but essentially it means the body is succumbing. So the body is on its way down and out. This is a guy who's in the hospital. The doctor says he could die at any minute. That's 6. It's a distinct feeling. All of these levels have distinct feelings. When you are dying, it's a different feeling from being sick. When you're sick, that's level 6, you're dysfunctional. This is like a person who has a high fever, he has tuberculosis or cancer or a broken leg. So sick here should be in quotes because we don't really use the word sick to talk about injuries, but injuries come under the same level. That's why I say dysfunctional. If a person has a broken nose, you could say his nose is sick. So that's level 6, dysfunctional. This person should be under the care of healthcare practitioners, might even need to be in bed or confined to his home, maybe even in a hospital. Level 5 is weak. Now we're getting into a large proportion of the population. And by weak, in this context, it's congruent with unhealthy. Most humans are weak and unhealthy. What we call aging, and I use that in quotes, is really a person descending this scale. A guy says, I'm 75 now and my age is catching up with me. I can't run anymore. So he has gone down the scale. The word aging is misleading in the sense that you could have somebody at a very high level who's elderly, and you could have somebody at a low level who's young. You have some kid who's got spinal meningitis. He's at level 6. They're energetic and so forth. When a person is born, he moves up the scale. Everybody enters at the bottom of the scale. The child moves up. The babies that are in the incubators, they're sick. Babies in general are weak and unhealthy. Infant mortality was very high until the 20th century. Okay, so then we come up to normal. Now, I use the word normal advisedly because normal is actually a mathematical term from the norm of something near the middle of the curve. We like to think he's normal, he's healthy. Although statistically, the norm might actually be 5, which is weak, especially if you're talking about people over 21. Most people, by the time they're 25, start to show signs of aging. What does that mean? It means and not going up the scale, they're going down the scale. But we'll stick with the word normal for healthy. So this is where people like to be, although most people who call themselves healthy are not what I would call healthy. Now, I'm what used to be called years ago a health nut. That's a passé term now, but because health has become mainstream, I was lifting weights when most people had never lifted a weight when I was a kid. I was in the weightlifting club when I was 14. But back in those days, most people didn't know anything about that. Growing up in an athletic family, I was able to move up pretty easily, pretty steadily. I believe it's 87% of all American males between 18 and 25 are not physically capable of being taken into the military. Now, it might be 77 because I'm doing this from memory, but it's either 77 or 87. Shocking. And I spoke to someone about this, and he said most of them are either overweight, which in many cases goes into obese, or mentally ill. So this is consistent with the fact that the United States is collapsing. It's way out of control. I remember looking at footage of refugees in and after World War II in Europe. We had millions of people who looked like they hadn't had a square meal in a year. So most of the people in the Nazi death camps were on their way down the scale. Most of them were at 6. And it wasn't just the Nazi death camps. The Japanese had a very similar thing. Most of the men in those camps were sick one way or another. We would like to have it be normal for people to be healthy. The reason I use the word normal is this is a guy, he can go to work, he can mow the lawn, he can drive the car, he can fix dinner. He's normal. Now, if you give him a 100-pound barbell, he's going to have trouble with it. Unless he's 6'8", then maybe he won't. But that's your normal person. Goes to work, he comes home, he has dinner, watches TV. On the weekend, maybe he goes fishing. That's the extent of his health regimen. Then we get up to 3, which is strong. If you've never been at this level, you don't know what you're missing because it is a very distinct feeling. You feel energetic. I used to say to people in my youth that I felt like I could rip a fire hydrant out of the sidewalk if I wanted to. I knew I couldn't, but that's how I felt. Somebody at this level doesn't get hungry, doesn't get tired, doesn't need a break. I'd be working with people for hours. They say, Jim, let's take a break. Oh, okay, we'll take a break. I never wanted a break. See, if you're strong, you're energetic, that's beyond normal. That's not normal anymore. You're energetic. You have a surplus of energy. So this is like the type of guy, he punches somebody in the jaw, breaks his jaw. That's a strong person. So then we go up from strong to athletic. This is what you find in the athletic world. Now, what do we mean by athletic? I'm not including a guy who works in an office and plays golf on the weekend. He might be athletic, but that's not what I'm talking about. This is more like professional athletes, competition athletes. It could even include high school athletes, or it can include somebody who is a serious fitness enthusiast, like a guy who goes to the gym 6 days a week and works out for an hour or 2. He might be at this level, even though strictly speaking, he's not an athlete. So this is vibrant. This is beyond energetic. This person is vibrant. And above that is a level that the vast majority of people never get to, which is superhuman, which is indestructible. Now, as I discussed in the chapter, sometimes you see hints of this. For example, sometimes you have a pitcher in baseball. The hitters are absolutely unsuccessful, and they say he's unhittable. You could say when Roger Clemens struck out 20 batters in a game, when you only have 27 hitters in a game, in his prime, he was superhuman because he did something that nobody has ever done before or since. A more plausible frame of reference for this is the Bible, which talks about Samson, who slew 1,000 Philistines with the jawbone of an ass. Or if you want to go over to Greek mythology, you have Hercules, the 7 impossible feats of Hercules. As I mentioned, Methuselah was said to live 900 years, when probably for most of those 900 years, he was superhuman. Otherwise, he wouldn't have lived 900 years in a day when there were no vitamins, no health clubs, no antibiotics, and so forth. So that's what this scale is about. Any questions?
What I see in all of this is different lifestyles, cultural norms, and environmental exposures can drastically impact the human energy system. And we can see that, what you were talking about in the US, it's the same in the UK. It's the environment people drink from and swim in, whereby it's either going to facilitate an elevated vitality and equanimity, or it's going to accelerate depletion and dysfunction. And so that continuum encompasses the full spectrum captured in this model. Looking at level 7, I was thinking of what Albert Einstein said. He said, energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be changed from one form to another. So
Uh-huh.
that immediately sparks, is there an energetic process at the end of life from a spiritual energetic lens? Can we measure energetic field changes and coherence in the dying, in the after death experience? That's a whole other subject. But what I'm trying to point to is that each one of these levels, you can look at level 6, where Paracelsus says the art of healing comes from nature, not from the physician. When you dovetail that into what I term is sick care by the medical system, and I'm not saying if you have a heart attack, they're going to feed you steak and fries. So you're going to need those kilojoules of energy to restart the heart. But I'm talking about the energetic systems and the links between depleted energy bodies and disease states. It's measuring that energetic chaos and dysregulation and dysfunction
Right.
in illnesses like chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, but it's evaluating energy-based modalities to help restore balance and flow or homeostasis in the human. This morning, I wrote a whole bunch of research points. As an example, if you study the Kung people of the Kalahari Desert, they were studied by researchers to understand the biological impacts of energy deficiency, because their meager hunter-gatherer lifestyle meant that they went days with little or no calorie intake. They forced their bodies into an extended state of slowed metabolism and depressed vital functions, but their bodies could still rebound when resources became available again. That showcases the potential resilience built into our human energy systems. This is something that's stripped out of our education, because everybody looks at poor diet, lack of physical activity, substance consumption, chronic stress patterns, sleep. Whilst those have their merit, there's a deeper aspect to all of this.
Yes.
There's so much potential research areas looking at this. I think this could keep me busy for the next 1,000 years.
You better be high on the scale if you want to last that long.
Like you, Jim, in the early 80s, I was running. As an example, I had my FEV, force expired volume of oxygen, was 250 because I was asthmatic. I
Uh-huh.
started running. I was studying for a degree in health and well-being at the time. I was interested in sport and fitness and health. The doctors at the time said, you need rest. That was the counsel at the
Right.
time. But I
Right.
ran. It killed me. 5 a.m. in the morning before college. I jump over the gates, get into the park, run like crazy. My heart was jumping out of my rib cage. My shins hurt. But at the end of 6 months, I blew that FEV off the scale, past 600. The GP said to me, how did you accomplish that? People would
Yes.
look at me very strangely when I was running. Like you were saying, you were a health nut. At college, I went into weightlifting. I became a
Uh-huh.
captain of a weightlifting team, where
Uh-huh.
most people had no idea. I really get the feeling of ripping that hydrant. I
Yes.
know that feeling. It's so strong. I'm in my 60s now, and I still have not the same strength. I'm not squatting 500-600 pounds like I used to, because I'm not
Right.
competing. I'm seeing on that scale that strong, energetic, athletic vibrancy is still here. There are people in the normal range who are what I would call vertically sick, vertically unwell. They're still walking around, but they've
Yes.
got diabetes, atherosclerosis.
Yeah, I want to mention something. In the Hindu tradition, there is a yogi who called Babaji, who lived reportedly 300 years. And the witnesses say that he looked age 30 until he died. This is a guy who, at some point, he was at level 1. he was virtually indestructible for much of that time in order for that to occur. To stay at 30 for hundreds of years, that's indestructible. Now, of course, eventually he descended the scale and died like everybody else. But let me give you a good way to think about this. Let's say you have a professional athlete, right? A professional footballer, tip-top condition, and you shoot him. So the bullet goes in the body. This guy descends this scale very quickly. If the bullet is big enough and you get him in the right spot, he's down to level 6 in a second. And in a few more seconds, he's dying. He goes right out the bottom of the scale. So that's a good way to think about this. But as far as application, this is extremely useful for trying to manage anyone's health, including one's own. Because as with all of the scales, when you know what level you're at, you know what you should be shooting for to move the person up. And I'll give you an example. I've worked with a lot of people as a holistic health practitioner. If a guy has something wrong with him, like the flu or something, I show up to see him. I say, how do you feel? He says, I'm really weak. I'm happy. He moved from 6 up to 5. He's not happy about this because he feels unhealthy, which he is. But I see that we made progress. Okay, now I have a weak person here. So I'm not going to try to get this guy to lift weights or run laps. I'm just going to try to get him up to being normal. See, again, all of these skills give you the right gradient, which enables you to resolve the situation. Most people who are not in the health field don't have a clue about this. As I mentioned in this chapter, medical doctors know about sickness and physical trainers know about health. If a guy is competing to be Mr. Universe or some weightlifting champ, he doesn't go to a medical doctor and say, what should I do, doc? He has a trainer, and the trainer knows all about how much he should run, how much he should eat, how much he should sleep. It's a different thing. The medical model, as with everything else that's ensconced in the establishment, is broken. It's a religion. A big shock for me was when I was in my 30s. I was in such good condition, and I'd walk into a room and people would stare at me. What are you doing? Especially when they saw me work out. I would have people come up to me at the gym and say, what are you training for? I wasn't training for any particular event. I was just very advanced on this scale. What was disappointing to me is that people never said, how did you do it? I thought people would say, wow, you look great. What are you doing? So I switched into a mode of when people come up to me and say, you look great. What are you doing? So I say to them, if you're interested, I'll tell you how I did it. Most of them don't respond positively. They don't want to hear about it. Once in a while, somebody says, oh, really? Tell me. And I tell them in 2 sentences. You have to have the health consciousness if you're going to move up the scale. If you go into medical facilities, clinics, hospitals, look at the people there. They're all at or near the bottom of this scale, including the nurses, including the receptionists, including the doctors. So you see the state of mind of the general populace. They have belief systems which are just like religions. They don't want to hear it. In other words, you'll have a person talk them into going to acupuncture to treat something. You talk to them afterwards and say, how did it go? Do you feel better? Yeah, I feel much better. And you find out they stopped going. It's just not in their mind. It's not part of their consciousness that they could do this. Or I had another friend who was a mainstream medical profession type person. And I would tell him that I was going for the chiropractor and acupuncture and all these things. He would say, yeah, but they didn't cure you. You're still going. So he didn't get the idea that this scale goes all the way up.
And it's cumulative. I worked with a chiropractor for many years. His level of diagnosis, not just on a physical level, but also on a mental and emotional level, he could check the subluxations in your spine and he could correlate that with a particular event. And he was always spot on. As an example, someone came in and she was a client of mine who had a migraine. And the migraine was because she was in the wrong place. Now, when I was talking to him about it, and this is philosophical more than evidential, but when you look at the fact that birds migrate, they can't stay in the same place. What was happening with this particular client was she felt she was in the wrong place in her life. And she had to move physically to her homeland, which was Italy. And when she'd moved there, the migraines had stopped. The anthropological research who study blue zones, and those regions have high concentrations of centenarians. They found that beyond diet and exercise, certain cultural traditions and spiritual frameworks played a key role in sustaining vitality over
Right.
lifespans.
I can tell you an interesting anecdote along those lines. When I was a kid, I had a lot of respiratory difficulty. I was generally diagnosed as bronchitis. Actually, they were wrong because I found out years later I actually was asthmatic. And nobody ever diagnosed me with that until I was 50. So I did this alternative therapy with a guy, and we did this session, this regression, and I ran back to some incident. When I was in that incident, I was suffocating. I literally was on the floor in the session. He just got me through it. It went away. And that was the end of my respiratory difficulty. One incident, we found this thing, and that was the end of my respiratory difficulty. It just went away. You can call it faith healing if you want. All the people who go to Lourdes in France, Our Lady of Lourdes, and the sacred water, and they get better. You could say that's anecdotal, and that's true, but it's also undeniable that hundreds and hundreds of people had that happen to them. There are millions and millions of stories of people with some kind of religious or spiritual healing that happened to them.
It's been shown that even prayer enhances lifespan. I go to where my father's from in Greece on the island, 80, 90-year-old women walking up a hill. The angle of elevation is quite steep, but they're carrying. It's not like someone puts it in your car and you
Right.
drive off. They're actually carrying. I watch them and I think, wow. I spoke to a couple of those ladies, and one lady was 87. And she said, of course, what else am I supposed to do? I go to the market, I get my fruit and vegetables, and I carry them home. There is that mobility and the very fact that people are active within that environment. I'm not saying that correlates to an extended lifespan, but the fact they're active, the fact that they are energetic in their lives, not like people in England who get to 65, 70. They live in a box, they watch a box, and they wait for a box.
That's cute.
When I went to my GP last week, I actually clocked the time. I wanted to see how much time he would give me. And it was around 7 to 8 minutes. I could sense his urgency to deal with it and get me out. The prescription is a ceremonial declaration for you to leave. There's no understanding of the emotional aspects. It's all physical.
That's right. That's right. The way I explain it to people is in medical school, they spend a lot of time studying cadavers. They're cutting up dead bodies, and here's the liver, here's the gallbladder. The problem with that is the thing that they should be studying has already left. That's why you have Jesus going around, making the lame walk, making the blind see, and all of that. He was using this spiritual power. What I want your listeners to know is there is now a fantastic array of what you might call technologies available for the improvement of your mental, emotional, and physical health. This is oppressed by the people who rule. The planet of Earth is controlled by no more than 8,000 people at absolute maximum. Okay, that's literally 1 in a million. They control everything. They control the banks, they control the churches, they control the universities. It's not one person, it's amongst these 8,000 people. Between them, they control all the governments, they control all the advertising. You have to realize that, and this is something that happened to me. I was very mainstream. I was in university. I grew up a very mainstream person. Win a scholarship, go to school, get a degree. But then later on, I found out there's this other thing going on. There's this alternative. Really, there's somebody doing this? Then I started looking into these things and finding out how much really valuable technology exists. And a lot of this stuff didn't exist 60 years ago. Now, acupuncture has gotten pretty well established. I've had over 1,500 acupuncture treatments. I still talk to people, they've never had any. I've had 2,500 chiropractic treatments. The people have never been to a chiropractor. To me, it's unthinkable that a person would go through life without getting his back adjusted. or without getting any type of holistic treatment on these things, because 99% of the things can be fixed holistically. Now, if you wait until it becomes cancer, obviously it's too late. If you start early and do all of this stuff preventatively, it's a tremendous difference. So I want the people out there to know there are alternatives. If you go on the internet, you can find them. You have to try them out. I knew about acupuncture intellectually, but one day I was talking to a friend of mine. She was in a car accident. She just anecdotally said, yeah, I was in this car accident and I had this terrible back pain. I went to acupuncturist and he put a needle in my back and I felt this terrible pain and it fixed it. I said, really? This is almost 30 years ago. I used to be a professional guitarist. So I had developed some kind of pain in my right elbow from this continuous action. Because when you play 8, 10 hours a day for 30, 40 years, it catches up to you, right? I found a guy in the building next to my office who was an acupuncturist. I said, yeah, my elbow hurts. He gave me 5 treatments, fixed it. I had been icing that elbow for 10 years. I put ice on it to kill the pain, and then it would stop hurting. I didn't want to take painkillers, but then the next day I would have to ice it again. Yes, there was some discomfort involved. When you put the needle in, it was, ooh, he fixed it in 5 treatments. So this was not time consuming, not expensive. I said, whoa, this is for me when I got into it.
When you understand when energetic depletion advances far enough, the delicate channels and meridians through which all those vital forces flow become obstructed and thrown into utter chaos and disarray. So
Right.
homeostatic systems fall into a state of complete dysregulation and a profound disorder takes hold within the energetic matrix. Severe physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual symptoms manifest because the entire being is crying out, struggling to restore its harmonious flow, its former
Right.
harmonious flow. But people want a quick fix, take a pill and
That's
forget about it.
That's right. So, like everybody in my family, when they want something heavy moved, they ask me to do it. The dresser here, it's 400 pounds. Jim, can you move this for us? Sure. They know I'm going for acupuncture. They know I'm going for chiropractic, but they don't do it because it's a belief system. I've had people who refuse to work for me because of their Christian beliefs. And I have to realize I had 15 years of Catholic education and was an altar boy for 4 years and studied with the Society of Jesus for 4 years and had a year of Bible studying. I know a lot more about Christianity than most people, including most of the clergy. I don't mean to criticize them because I have a lot of friends who are priests. I know these people. I know what they know. But then you have some guy who's got some weird belief system that somehow I'm not a Christian. So I don't go around saying I'm a Christian. I don't really associate myself with any group because I'm not limiting myself to that. So I've been criticized for being a Christian, and I've also been criticized for not being a Christian. So critical people are going to criticize you because that's what they do. But those are not effective people. Effective people are more interested in producing a result than in criticizing. So I want your listeners to know there are alternatives out there. You don't have to be trapped in a dysfunctional healthcare system. There are all kinds of other things that you can do, but you have to take responsibility for yourself. If you're exercising every day, if you're eating a healthful diet every day, if you're getting holistic healthcare on a regular basis, if you're taking the right supplements, all these things cumulatively work. They add up. They feed into one another, but you have to do it. The model we have is I have a pain in my side. I'm going to go to the doctor and he gives me a pill. You don't know what's in the pill. You're not assuming any responsibility. For example, I give myself castor oil treatments for the liver, which is something I learned from acupuncturists. Fantastic results. I do it myself. It costs almost nothing. A whole quart of organic castor oil, you heat it up, you put it on, and it fixes your liver, which has over 500 functions in the body. If you're not doing these things, you're going to get what you deserve, which is a lot of discomfort and an early death. You have to assume responsibility for pushing yourself up the scale.
Too many people are fed like dogs and slumped in comfort. A lot of the things you're talking about are also free. When you look at the Japanese called forest bathing, they've measured effects of forest bathing. They've measured effects of earthing. They've measured the effects of natural biorhythms, and they've evaluated energy cultivation practices like Tai Chi on vitality markers. These are all ancient practices that I know a lot more people are gravitating towards today, but it's still not enough. There is that level of responsibility, the ability to respond to your well-being, the measures that you can take to maintain vigor into advanced age.
Yeah, I try to help people whenever I can. Like I see people help drinking coffee. Who's a friend? I'll say, "You're destroying your adrenal glands with that coffee." I don't want to hear about it.
I remember researching when I did a thesis for health and the effects on different tribes. One of the tribes was the Hunza people in Pakistan. They are renowned for incredible vitality and longevity. They were famous for maintaining robust health and astounding energy well
Right.
into their 90s and beyond. They actually documented them 100, 110 playing polo because they have this simple mountain lifestyle. And I'm not saying we all regress to this lifestyle, but they're eating whole foods from a mineral rich soil. They're engaging in physical activity. They're in community, which I think is related to establishing connective threads of immunity, because there
Mhm.
is that strong connective thread and support. Live in harmony with natural biorhythms. That seems to foster an elevated baseline of
Mhm.
renewable vigor.
The first thing with all of these scales is you have to take responsibility to look at it and study it. Then you have to take the responsibility of saying, where am I on this scale? Meaning you have to look in the mirror and see what's there. So with this scale, but with all of them, now in this case, it's about physical fitness, but most people don't want to do that. Don't bother me. I'm busy. I have to go to work. I have to finish this project. I have to get to my next appointment, but they're not going to take responsibility. So then you come back 5 years later, and the guy, he's having a heart transplant. A friend of mine who very overweight, the type of guy, I didn't really ask him about this, but I could just tell from hanging around him, never exercised at all. You could just tell by looking at him. He had a physique like Alfred Hitchcock. So one day he just dropped dead. And what I was told is that he had a massive heart attack. He died instantly, didn't know what hit him. That did not surprise me. This was a nice guy. We worked together. He was highly regarded in his field, very successful, a lot of money. But meanwhile, he just dropped dead on the sidewalk one day. That's what you get if you don't take responsibility for your body. Now, oddly enough, people will take more responsibility for their automobiles and their pets than for one's own body, which I think is just daffy. Or got to get that oil change, got to change the coolant for the radiator. But what about your own body? Because there's hundreds and hundreds of different technologies that you can use, most of which are free. Or you might do a little bit of education, which might cost, and then you have that access for the rest of your life. But I'll tell you something that I observed from dealing in this field for a long time. I was once working with a client who was the executive director of a company. Most of what came up in our sessions was the problems he had with his job, very challenging job. And one day he had a big realization that I never forgot. He said to me, "Jim, the problem is not money. It's not that they don't want to spend the money. It's that they don't want to do anything. Try to get somebody to read a book, lots of luck, or try to get somebody to work out every day. You don't have to run 5 miles. You can walk a mile and maybe 2 miles." And we both had a good laugh at that. That yes, that's the problem with people. It's not the money, because people always say, "Oh, it's the money. Oh, you're going to charge me for this." That's not what it is. It's they're not responsible enough to do what they need to do. For example, I do almost an hour of stretching every day. As a result of that, I don't need to go to a chiropractor anymore because the whole thing just adjusts itself. I know what stretches to do. I didn't make up these stretches. I learned them from professionals. I do them certain numbers of times and it just fixes everything. It doesn't cost me anything other than the time. But there's effort involved. It takes discipline. I've often said to my acupuncturists, acupuncture will never be as popular as it should be because people don't want to confront the pain. They're sticking needles in your body. Some of them don't hurt at all, but some of them do. Not in a prolonged way. It might hurt for a second, but people don't want to deal with that. They want to get a pill and make the symptoms go away. But that's not how the body works.
There was a powerful and potent part in your book Septemics, and I'm probably paraphrasing, if you ignore the rhetoric and observe behavior, it is obvious that a subtle form of suicide is being practiced by the majority of humanity, which is indicative of egregious irresponsibility.
That's in this chapter. You can see what they're doing. They're just irresponsible. Now, they're not necessarily too stupid to learn these things. They're just too downscale to correct themselves or to discipline themselves. They don't want to hear about it. I used to be a runner. I ran over 30,000 miles in my career. I would be out running my 5 miles, which was my standard thing. And I would actually have hecklers, instead of saying, way to go, that's good, keep it up. They were like making fun, jeering, making stupid jokes. A guy sitting on the sidelines drinking beer, making fun of me running my 5 miles.
He's the one that's going to drop dead.
That's right. That's right. That person is going to go down the scale a lot faster than he need, a lot faster than could happen. So really, with all these skills, it's about being responsible. That's why I say Septemics is for people who want to improve themselves or others. That's only about 50% of the human race. The other 50%, they're not interested in improving themselves or others. They just want to drink that martini, eat that steak, and watch TV. That's it. So they're not going to read this book. Even if they did read it, they wouldn't understand it because the concept is not there. The idea that you're going to lift yourself up by your bootstraps, which is what this book facilitates. You find your level and you move yourself up to the next level. And you can do it because you know the correct level, and the next level is the next thing for you. So you will be able to do it. I urge people to take advantage of this because my motto in this regard is, your success is my reward.
When one can learn to circulate and amplify the vital force that is inherent within each one of us, you can sustain extraordinary high energy levels.
Yes.
It's not an academic perusal or a pursuit. It's something that I've experienced because I understand the flow of energy within my system, and I'm able to understand that symptoms are nature's way of telling you that something needs to change, something needs to elevate, something needs to be refined. You need to do something, but we suppress it, whether it's a medication or whatever it is. And then it's out of sight, out of mind until it resurrects itself. It's tapping you and giving you warning, which is a beautiful system to alert you, and you don't listen to it. And you go crying and screaming that your life has been turned upside down and you can't bring chaos out of coherence anymore in your life. Crisis reveals cruciality. It's telling you something, but are you listening?
Yes. When I was a runner, I've lived in the desert most of my adult life, and I would run typically 5 miles in triple digits. So it would be like 105, and I'd run 5 miles. And it didn't bother me at all. I sweated a lot, but other than that, I felt exactly the same at the end of the run as I did at the beginning of the run, because I was at that level where running 5 miles in 110 degrees was nothing to me. Didn't bother me. And people say, you're going to have a heart attack. Those people are all dead, and I'm still here.
Jim, thank you so much for today. I know we could continue. It reminds me of what Aristotle said, that the energy of the mind is the essence of life. When we understand that we need to combine our hearts and our minds and all of our energy systems to sustain flow. Otherwise, most people are walking around, as I said, vertically unwell. Their straw is clogged, so nothing flows, and they keep clogging it with more stuff. It's not so much about what you can add, it's more what you can subtract from your life.
That's right. That's right. I live on a very restricted diet. I was in a doctor's office a couple of years ago for some acupuncture. Somehow the subject of my diet came up, and I said, this is what I eat. After that conversation, the nurse who was present hearing this said to me, just a conversation, do you have cheat days? I said, no. She said, how do you do that? I said, I know what's good for my body. So you see, he had a different mindset about this. I found out that gluten was bad for you. That was it. I never ate it again. Before that, I didn't know. So you have to find out about these things. But that's why I say there's a lot of data available. There's all kinds of practitioners out there. And I listen to these people, I study these people, I read these books and such, and I urge everybody else to do that too. Don't trust the medical doctors. Now, someday, 50, 60, 70 years from now, you'll be in the hands of a medical doctor because you're on your way out. But between now and then, there's 1,000 other options that are better, effective, safer, efficient, efficacious that you should be using, not medical means. And I have nothing against doctors. If you have an infection or a broken bone, go to a doctor. That's good for it. Give you a shot of penicillin. They set the bone. But the other 99% of the things that are wrong with people, they don't know anything about.
I maintain that they're good mechanical engineers, but what we actually need is electromagnetic engineers. I think that's part of the future of medicine, is to understand more about the electromagnetics of the human design. And maybe not in my lifetime, but if we can put ourselves in that environment, research, your body's always telling you. You just got to be able to have the awakened awareness to listen to what those symptoms are telling you. If you've got an ache in here, it may not be because of something that you did here. It might be referred pain. Taking a pill and suppressing it, inflammation, has its merits. I'm not saying it doesn't, but you have to go to the cause. I usually find with most clients, it's something in their life or in their childhood that they've suppressed. It's indelibly engraved psychic residue into their neurology, their physiology. And it's only when they release that it dissipates. They start to be free. It's like throwing off an old heavy winter coat. They're liberated. They feel a sense of liberation, and you can hear it in their articulation, in their tone, in their pitch, in their posture. They have this unfettered versatility. They no longer belong to this tribe of brains that goes, "Do you have cheat days?" That's a tribe of brains that does that.
Yeah, and that's something that never even occurred to me as a question. I thought it was hilarious.
Where can people find you, Jim?
I invite your viewers to my website, which is septemics.com, SEPTEMICS, where you can see what many readers have said, what many journalists have written. You can read sections of the book itself. You can read the reviews. And there's even a pre-recorded introduction to Septemics for a new person, which will explain it to him in about 15 minutes.
Thank you, Jim.
Yes, thank you. Have a good week.